Most men walk away from connection not because she didn't feel something, but because they never noticed it. She gave signals without saying a word. A look held a second too long. A laugh that meant more than humor. A silence filled with meaning. And while you waited for clear signs, she waited for you to understand what she couldn't say out loud. This video isn't about chasing women, it's about finally seeing what's already there. Because the truth is, once you recognize the silent signs, everything changes. Stay with me till the end. The third sign is the one most men realize too late. Comment below where you're watching from, subscribe to the channel for more real, honest insights on attraction and connection. When a woman likes you, her attention doesn't announce itself loudly. It reveals itself quietly, consistently, and almost unconsciously. Most men are trained to look for dramatic signs, obvious flirting, bold compliments, or clear invitations. But attraction doesn't usually move that way. It moves through focus, through presence, through the subtle pull of awareness that keeps returning to the same person, even when nothing demands it. If you understand this, you begin to see interest long before it ever becomes spoken. Watch where her attention goes when she doesn't think anyone is watching. In group settings, notice who she orients toward, whose reactions she checks for, whose words seem to matter just a little more. Even if she's talking to others, her eyes often return to you, not because she's trying to signal anything, but because attention follows emotional relevance. The mind naturally tracks what it values. This isn't flirting, it's psychological prioritization, and it's one of the clearest indicators of interest there is. You'll also notice it in the details she remembers. A comment you made in passing weeks ago, a preference you never emphasized, a story you thought was insignificant. Memory is not neutral. We don't remember everything. We remember what carries emotional weight. When she recalls small things about you, it's not politeness, it's investment. Her mind has filed you away as someone worth keeping track of. Most men dismiss this as friendliness because they underestimate how selective attention really is. There's also a responsiveness that shows up here. When you speak, she listens not just to reply, but to understand. Her reactions come quickly. Her expressions shift with your tone. There's a rhythm to the interaction that feels natural, almost effortless. This happens because her nervous system is tuned in. Interest heightens awareness, and awareness sharpens connection. You don't force this kind of engagement. It happens when someone genuinely cares how they're coming across to you. What confuses many men is that this attention is often wrapped in casual behavior. She may tease you, act relaxed, or downplay the significance of the interaction. That's not disinterest, it's self-protection. Attraction makes people vulnerable, and subtlety feels safer than exposure. The mistake is assuming that because she isn't obvious, she isn't interested. In reality, the quieter the attention, the more authentic it often is. Here's the deeper truth. Attention is the currency of attraction. People give their attention where their emotions already live. If you learn to observe where her focus naturally settles, you stop guessing and start understanding. And once you understand that attention never lies, you realize that the signs were never hidden. You were just taught to look in the wrong place. Attraction doesn't always announce itself through pursuit. In fact, when a woman likes you, she often does something far more subtle. She creates pathways. She builds small, almost invisible bridges that keep the connection alive without putting herself in a position of outright rejection. This is where most men get confused, because they're taught to recognize interest only when it looks like chasing. But real interest, especially when it's genuine and emotionally intelligent, tends to move through access rather than demand. Pay attention to how often she finds reasons to stay connected. A message that didn't really need to be sent. A question she could have easily answered herself. A comment on something you posted that didn't require a response, yet invited one anyway. These moments aren't random. They are intentional without being obvious. Psychologically, this is low-risk engagement. She's testing the emotional temperature, seeing if the door is still open without stepping fully through it. You'll notice this pattern in conversation as well. When the interaction could naturally end, she extends it just a little longer. She brings up an inside joke. She circles back to a previous topic. She asks what you think, not because she lacks an opinion, but because your perspective matters to her. Philosophically speaking, we seek proximity to what we value. And when direct proximity isn't available or feels risky, we create symbolic closeness through communication. What's important to understand here is consistency. One message doesn't mean much. One question could be politeness. But repeated efforts to maintain connection, especially without a clear external reason, reveal emotional intent. The mind doesn't invest energy without purpose. Attention costs something. Time costs something. And when someone keeps paying that cost, it's because the connection is giving them something in return: curiosity, comfort, excitement, or emotional safety. Many men mislabel this behavior as just being nice, because they underestimate how selective people are with their energy. Adults don't maintain unnecessary connections. Life is too busy for that. If she continues to reach out, respond thoughtfully, and create conversational openings, it means you occupy mental space. You matter enough to be remembered, revisited, and re-engaged. That's not friendliness, that's presence. There's also an emotional intelligence at play. By keeping things light and indirect, she preserves dignity while still expressing interest. It's a balancing act between desire and self-respect, and the men who recognize this don't rush or pressure. They meet subtlety with awareness. They respond calmly, confidently, and without desperation. That's what keeps the bridge standing. Here's the reflection to leave with. When someone repeatedly creates reasons to stay connected, they're telling you something without words. The question isn't whether she's interested. The question is whether you're perceptive enough to recognize the invitation and grounded enough to respond with intention. The sign most men miss isn't physical, and it isn't verbal. It's emotional. When a woman genuinely likes you, her emotional tone changes in your presence. Not in a dramatic way, not in a way that demands attention, but in a way that subtly reshapes the entire interaction. This is where attraction becomes real, because emotions are harder to fake than behavior. And if you learn to recognize this shift, you stop relying on surface signals and start understanding what's actually happening beneath them. Listen to her voice when she speaks to you compared to how she speaks to others. There's often a softness there, a warmth that wasn't present before. Her pace may slow down, her tone may become more expressive, and her reactions feel more attuned. This happens because emotional interest activates vulnerability. When someone cares, they become more careful with how they communicate. They're no longer just exchanging words, they're managing connection. You'll also notice emotional openness begin to appear. She may share frustrations, personal thoughts, or stories that don't usually come up in casual conversation. This isn't oversharing, it's selective disclosure. Psychologically, we reveal ourselves to people we trust and value. Emotional disclosure is a form of intimacy long before anything physical happens. When she lets you see beyond her surface self, she's signaling comfort, safety, and curiosity about being understood by you. Another overlooked shift is emotional responsiveness. She reacts more deeply to what you say, not just with laughter or agreement, but with reflection. She asks follow-up questions. She remembers how something made you feel. She adjusts her responses based on your emotional state. This level of attunement doesn't come from politeness. It comes from care. Her nervous system is engaged with yours, creating a subtle emotional feedback loop. That's attraction operating on a deeper level. Many men miss this because they're conditioned to look for confidence cues rather than comfort cues. But comfort is where attraction stabilizes. Anyone can flirt briefly. Few people offer emotional presence. When she relaxes around you, when her guard lowers, her humor becomes more natural, and her seriousness feels more honest. That's not neutrality. That's emotional alignment. There's also a paradox here. The more she likes you, the less obvious she may become. Emotion creates stakes. Stakes create caution. So instead of leaning forward physically, she leans forward emotionally. Instead of bold gestures, she offers sincerity. This is why men who are emotionally literate tend to experience deeper, more authentic connections. They know how to read the room beyond appearances. The final thought to sit with is this: attraction doesn't always ask to be noticed, but emotion always leaves a trace. If you stop watching her body and start listening to her emotional shifts, you'll realize that the most meaningful signals were never loud. They were honest.